better now. Now, Louise Millman is a Georgia person. I'm not sure I want to call you a resident of Georgia, Louise Millman, but let's say you're an inhabitant of Georgia, right? You're trying very much to have an existence with your husband and your two daughters, ages 7 and 10. One that's not visible, right? You want to live quietly and be left alone as a well. What is it you're doing in your property in Georgia?
Can you hear me good? Yeah. Okay. We're homesteaders. That's basically what it is. I mean, we're wanting to live kind of off the land, right? I feel like sometimes I belong in a different era, right? Like wanting to really take it back and just kind of like live off of our land and be able to live, I don't want to say easier because it's definitely not easier, but a simpler life, and just do as much as we can on our own land, living off of our own land.
Well, there are people who are libertarians who would say, well, hold on for a second. You're wanting to do everything yourself. You want to make your own this, your own that, and provide for yourself. That you're losing the advantage of specialization. If we all specialize in our economy, you do one thing very, very well and do it far better than you could do it if you did 15 other things all kind of at a low level. But that's an argument I'm sure you've heard before. How is it that doing more things yourself and making them yourself, maybe your own soap? Do you make your own soap, for example? Sounds like you might.
I have, yes.
You have, okay. Well, so that's something that you were able to do, and other things. And I hope we can hear Louise about your life as a homesteader. But so you're trying to be independent. You're trying not to rely on other people for things and services that you need.
Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's the whole idea, is we're wanting to be independent. It's not necessarily that we can't utilize other people for other things, but that we don't necessarily need to. If we ever needed to create our own soap, we could if we wanted to, right? But maybe I don't always want to make my own soap. I'm not really a fan of making soap. So at some point, like maybe I might ask somebody else to make some soap for me, right? But at the same time, if I needed to, I could. And that's kind of what it is. It's like being able to show myself and my family that we can live off the land if we really wanted and needed to. And yeah.
Well, what are some of the ways in which you are living off the land now, Louise?
I would like, we're growing a lot of our own food. We're producing a lot of our own energy.
Well, hold on, back up. Growing a lot of our own food. That's a very vague statement. What do you mean by that? Say more. Be specific.
We are gardening. We are growing, we have a food forest as far as like an orchard. So we have a lot of fruit trees that we planted. We have a huge garden space where we're growing vegetables and stuff like that. And then also...
What kind of vegetables?
What kind of vegetables are we not growing? That's the real question. No.
That would be a shorter list.
Yeah. No, we plan on, last year we're actually expanding what we're going to grow this year. But pretty much everything that you could think of that you would normally grow in this area, even to the point of... loofah sponges, like it's a squash that you can grow, but if you let it dry out and peel the squash back, you can actually cut it up and it becomes your sponge. So maybe I don't need to make soap. Maybe I could just grow loofah and just wash my body with that. So we do food, we do vegetables, we grow sponges. We are we don't have any pigs at the moment because we've already harvested them, but we do have a few cows out there.
How many did you have?
4.
You had 4 and they went to be slaughtered.
No, we did everything at our property, from we raised them to the kill to the butcher to the packaging, all of it ourselves. And
now, did you do that or your husband?
We both did that together, and it was a lot of work, and almost to the point where you brought back, like, sometimes people specialize in certain things, and taking that away from someone or doing it yourself, like we realized when we did that, like that is something that we probably don't necessarily want to do.
Is there a book on how to slaughter a pig?
There is, and we actually got that book.
And read it.
And read it.
Before.
Yep, and good old YouTube, looked up some videos. We probably watched a video the same video like 4 times because we're like, okay, how did he do that? And we watched it and we watched it and we watched it, and then we went out and we started doing it, and we're like, oh, let's watch that again.
Were your daughters playing a game in the front room while you were out in the back doing this butchery? Or did they help you and watch you?
It was dependent on the pig. The first one, they wanted nothing to do with it. Totally cool. Second one, actually one of the older daughters, or my oldest daughter, had a friend, and she was a few years older, and she actually wanted to be a part of it. She was like, this is really cool. So then my oldest daughter was like, well, I think I want to. And she kind of walked around at a really bad moment, and she got really upset and like ran off and started crying, and I had to go back to her and tell her, like, listen, like, if you want to become a vegetarian, like, that is okay, that is your choice, but if you're gonna eat meat, baby, like, you need to understand that this is how it happens. And actually, this isn't really how it happens in slaughter, homes or like slaughterhouses where animals aren't even treated good. I mean, like, we really honored that animal's life. We really had our, we thanked it for its sacrifice, and we did all these things. Like, this animal was treated really well, and my daughter was, we had this.
It had a good life as a pig.
It had a wonderful life and a wonderful death too. I mean, I know that sounds strange, but it was. I mean, it had no idea what was coming. It was.
Now, did you have freezer capacity for this large carcass that you had cut up? I guess
we had to get multiple freezers. By the fourth one, we're like, okay, we need more freezer space, and so we ended up having 3 entire freezers full of.
Could you have sold the meat, or are there limits and rules prohibiting that?
There are limits and rules prohibiting that. I think if I had like a PMA, I could have probably, but I don't know if I would.
PMA being
a private membership association. You could probably, with your homestead, because you would have to butcher it in a certain way, in a certain place where there was, like, they'd have to come out and make sure it was sanitized properly. Like, there's all this stuff that goes into it, right? But I don't think we would have ever sold it anyways, because I just don't know how you could put a value on that animal's life and all that went into the raising, the killing, like all of it. Like, so.
All right, so you're saying you wouldn't have sold it. Would you have traded for it?
Possibly, and I have traded. I have
which
definitely.
is selling it, but you're not using money, right? You're not using currency.
Right. Yeah. I've definitely, used it as like a friend provided a service or a product or whatever, and they were like, well, just give me what you need. And I'm like, oh, here's 2 pounds of my pork that was raised, there is no value that I could really put on it, but it's like, here's the love that I want to share with you.
Well, why in homesteading, well, let me back up here. Why are you homesteading? What are you afraid of? What is ahead that you're preparing for, if anything, Louise? Let's say in our national economy or the North Georgia economy in that state, what's ahead that you're concerned about? Why are you doing these things, looking into the future?
That's a really great question. I don't really like to say that I'm afraid of anything, really. It's more just about being prepared, right? Like, there's nothing ever I feel like being prepared is always going to be the best option. And we all seen what happened over the last couple of years. We don't know. Nobody really knows what's coming. But what I do know is that I'm raising my children to be able to be sustainable if they need to, right? And I think that's a really important part of our lives, is making sure that we can take care. We don't need to rely on an outside force in order for us to live our life. And like, can we rely on it sometimes? Sure. Do we want to? Sometimes, absolutely. But do we need to? No. And that's really what I don't really think that I'm afraid of anything. If anything, it's just more about preparing for our children also to kind of like learn some of the skills that our generations have lost because we've gotten so far away from living off of our land. We've gotten so far away from being connected with the food that we eat. Most people don't even know what food looks like being grown on a vine, or like, I mean, it's crazy to think most people think food comes from a grocery store. Well, guess what? It doesn't. There's so much more to it than that. And so I feel like it's just more about stepping back. I feel like the way to protect our future is really to kind of take a few steps back into our past and see what it is that we used to do before we became so reliant on such a system.
I think pernicious and great ones in our elite abuser classes have stolen many things from us. I think the rainbow, for example, is something that has been stolen from Christendom. And I think the word sustainable also, you say you want your children to be sustainable, your 2 daughters who are ages 7 and 10. Do you want them to be sustainable, or do you want them to be self-sustaining? And what's the idea in sustainability when you're using it in their context? What is it you're wanting them to get from you to make them self-sustaining? That's how I would describe it, self-sustaining.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely say more self-sustaining than sustainable, because they are different, right?
I'm an editor. I always, what's the right word choice? But right. Okay, so how do these girls become self-sustaining? Tell me who they're going to become in your fantasy of their futures.
Oh man, that's so hard, because the visions that we hold for our children, right? And it's not always what they want, and we have to be able to sometimes separate ourselves from what it is that they're going to become versus what we want them to become, right? But you're gifting them. Right. We're gifting them with the opportunity to be able to become whatever it is that they want to become, and especially giving them the opportunity to learn some of these things. I mean, I think really for me, one of the most important things, we're unschoolers, right? We unschool. And from the beginning of their life, they've been unschooled, basically. They've never been to a school. They used to go to a Montessori preschool back when we lived in
Montessori?
California. Yeah, preschool when we lived in California. But other than that, they've been unschooled their whole life. And so for me, it's like keeping the love of learning alive for them so that whatever it is that they want to pursue, they can pursue.
Now, again, you want your daughters to be self-sustaining. So, what are some specific things that you've taught them this week that would be in that direction? It's self-sustaining girls.
Well, we've done a lot
unschooled.
Right. We've done a lot of planting this week. We've done a lot of starting of seeds. We've done a lot of watering and talking about what plants need to grow, right? And it's not even just talking, but it's also about doing and having them be a part of that. They take care of our chickens, they take care of our cows, and they've been planting a lot of food with us and doing a lot
of what?
Food.
Oh, okay.
And doing quite a bit of archery, so we practice that just for them to kind of like it's fun for them to get out there and shoot their bows and just like have a lot of fun there. And it's also teaching them about aiming and about where and how to shoot your a target or whatever. So I mean, if you're going to say just this week, I would say those are some of the things that we've been working on.
And so that would be, for example, self-defense, right? If there's an attacking wildcat coming across the field to the house and seeing this girl, she'll have her bow handy and she can defend herself. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, okay. I heard music come on, so I was like, what happened?
This is David Tulis, and that's the bed.
Now, the smartest guy with the bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit more, Louise, about your daughters, and we were asking, you live on a homestead somewhere in Georgia with your husband and your two daughters. You want to be 100% off the grid, and your husband's former military man, 6 years, and you have sort of business ideas or businesses that you're pursuing. And I wanted just to ask more about that, and specifically your daughters, and my own take on the future of our country is that we have the great blessing and possibility of more local economy. In other words, the global economy is breaking down, and COVID-19 accelerated this process. And our national economy, our just-in-time supply system, our big box stores, our gigantic behemoth businesses that come with behemoth debt-laden government, they're all going to be falling into dysfunction, I think, as these things break down. Even the internet may break down. So we have the grid, very fragile American power grid. We have rising prices in fuel. Our supplies are largely tapped out, according to James Howard Kunstler. And we have inflation, which of course ruins all the economy, the whole entire economy. Even that run by the elite is ruined by inflation, and that's the central bank process. The Federal Reserve System is doing that to us. And so your idea of a kind of subsistence economy at your property, a rural property in Georgia, is one in which you can withstand these external threats, these external pressures that are almost all of them decapitalizing, or they would tend to be decapitalizing, ruinous, and even perhaps connected in some cases with starvation and famine. I mean, those are things that are, it seems to me, in some parts of the economy, among some players, a plan. It's what they plan for us is to be greatly stressed. The sanctions against Russia have as the fruit intended harm to local economy, harm to the European economy. So we have you living, trying to be self-sustaining as a homesteader. So getting back to your two daughters, they're ages 7 and 10. You're wanting them to be sustainable or self-sustaining, to be able to be independent. I want to hear more about these girls and what kinds of things that they do. Be real specific, because I want to see what's happening at your property in this rural place.
All right.
Louise Milliman.
Yeah. I can be more specific. Like you asked, basically this week, what have they done? For example, on our property, when you drive through, right, we have this long, narrow driveway that opens up into this big field, and there's a nice stream that kind of goes through. And when you walk up, there's a cow pasture on the right, where all the cows are pastured. They're eating grass.
How many are there?
Right now we have 6. We had 2 pregnant mamas. They both calved about 2 months ago. And we just recently set up some rotational grazing fencing so that they won't overgraze the grass. And there's some stuff about that if you guys ever want to learn. If you do raise cattle, look into rotational grazing. It's so much better for the cattle, so much better for the earth and the soil. And then you drive through, right? And we have this pond, and our property is there's like 3 levels, right? There's like the main floor, and then there's like a
You
hill.
mean your house?
No, the property.
Okay.
There's
the main floor?
main level of the land.
Okay, so there's the flat part. Okay, go ahead.
The flat part, yeah. And then there's like a hill, and it's like the second flat part, and then there's like a third flat part up top. So there's almost like 3 sections, and on the second section there's like a big pond. And when we first bought the property, the pond, one of the banks had broken from the pond, and so right now we're currently refilling that. But before we did that, we decided to put a pipe in where right below where that pond sits at the bottom level of our property is where we built our garden. So if we ever needed to gravity irrigate the garden, we could actually just turn a little nozzle on the pipe that we installed, and then the water would flow from the pond into the garden, right? And so this is something that our girls have been a part of since we started doing it. We explained to them why we're doing it. We explained to them how we're going to build the bank up, why we're going to use what we're going to use, why we're digging clay up from a different part of the property, which they've also been a part of, and we're bringing it over there and we're packing it
Do they
together.
have their own shovels?
Little
shovels?
My youngest, who's like 7, she'll pick up a grown shovel and she'll use it better than I do. It's pretty impressive. And then we explained to them the water and how the hill and the runoff of the water, and we dug a trench out so we can actually direct the water where we want it to go so it doesn't flood out our garden. And we have these conversations with them. We sit in the garden, we look at the sun, we see where the sun rises, where the sun sets, and we say, okay, this is why we're going to plant this here. If we plant this here, it's going to cause too much shade for this plant over here. We have these conversations with them all the time. So it's like as they're doing, they're learning. And at the same time, we're learning. Like, this is not something that we were just born knowing. Like, we have to look something up. If something comes up, they have a question, we're like, you know what, baby, that's a great question. Let's look it up. And we can turn to our good old Google or whoever we want to turn to, and we can look something up. We can read it. We have tons of books. I mean, like you said, the internet might not always be around. So about 6 months ago or so, we started stocking up on hardcover books because I don't want to rely on the internet. If you have to look something up, you do not have the knowledge. The knowledge is not there. Yeah, the book that you're holding up, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. It's like everything we want to do is illegal, and it's so frustrating because I don't want to have to ask for permission if I want to grow food. I don't want to have to ask for permission if I want to catch rain. I don't want to ask for permission if I want to do anything, right? Like, if I own my own land, I should be able to do what I want to do on my own land. So you mentioned that we want to be living 100% off the grid, and we do, and we are currently right now living 100% off the grid. There's nothing out there other than our solar panels and batteries and our water and on our home, so we are currently doing it. We hope to continue doing it as long as we possibly can. It's not easy, but it's definitely, to me, going to be worth it.
The book that Louise Milliman is mentioning is Everything I Want to Do is Illegal: War Stories from the Local Food Front by Joel Salatin. He's a famous writer, and wow, he signed it.
Yeah, we're buddies.
My good, thank you, good Louise. Blessings, Joel Salatin. A book I've wanted to read for a long time. I know it's been out there probably for about 10 years. And it's maybe I can suggest it to my book fairy, who's gracious enough to send me books that I'm interested in. 2007, and so you're wanting to be left alone, right? That's what the Southerners said during the war to prevent Southern independence. We just want to be left alone, and I think we have a right to be left alone, and to not be questioned, invaded, spied on, visited by good people with authority. We want to have as little authority near us as possible.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't. Nobody wants to be told what to do.
You don't have an electric line coming to your house?
No.
Did you build this house?
We don't have a house quite yet.
But where do you live?
We're living inside of our camper on the property, so we have solar batteries connected with, solar panels connected to batteries, and right now we're actually, again, we're learning as we go. So we've hooked all this up. We have plenty of power. We're doing doing great. Then we start learning. We have this killer deal on some batteries, and then what we realized is 2 of them were bad, and they were actually pulling too much, and the draw wasn't good. And then we ended up, we couldn't figure out the power situation. So now we just got a solar generator. We're figuring it out. And so I love what you say about sustainability versus self-sustaining, because when I first thought we're going to live off the grid, we're going to be fully sustainable, and then I realized that we have all these batteries, and I realized sometimes you're running on a generator, and I'm like, this doesn't feel sustainable. But
it really isn't.
Right, it's not. It's absolutely not. But the whole idea is that we're wanting to learn and evolve as we go. We eventually will have wind out there.
Well, how do you wash clothes, Louise?
I actually go somewhere to wash clothes. So eventually, and we've talked about this, and I don't know if we're going to do it, but we've talked about it. We've talked about putting an old drum of a washing machine on a bicycle and kind of like, having that happen. But, I used to live off the grid when we lived in Chile for 8 months. We moved down to South America right when my husband got out of the military. And that was the first time we ever did something like this. And it was really an interesting experience for us. Sometimes we did wash clothes in the creek and we hung them out to dry. But I don't see us doing that right now. I see us being able to use some of the modern technologies that we have in our own way. Because the goal isn't to be like so super primal that like even right now, like our life sometimes is so full of just like everyday living stuff that like it's hard to live in this modern world that we're living in, and so we kind of want to find that balance.
Well, you don't have a house yet. What do you plan to do to build a house? And does your husband, and what is his name?
Ryan.
Does Ryan plan to build it himself? And by what means? Are there neighbors to maybe help raise the beams or raise the A part of the roof? How do you plan to build it, and with what? I guess I could ask.
Yeah, that's a really great question, because we're actually doing some really cool things out on our property. We have, you guys heard of grain silos, what you guys put, the big grain bins that you use. The first two structures that are going to go up on our property are going to be made out of grain bins. And we're going to put the grain bin structure up, and then we're going to finish the inside, and we're going to build
How tall is a grain bin?
It's 2 stories. I don't exactly know how tall, but it will be 2 stories. So
35 feet, 40 feet maybe.
Yeah, so we'll have a main floor, and then we'll have a loft, and we'll have spiral stairs going around, and that's going to be the first structure just for us to get out of living. We lived in our camper full time for 10 months when we were traveling across the country, like just living in our camper. So we kind of want to get out of that and get more into this grain bin, which eventually will turn into hopefully having like a farm.
And what's the grain bin made out of?
It's made out of metal, steel,
okay.
Not really,
okay.
Yeah, just whatever those are. So we have 2 of those, and then we're actually getting a smaller one as well. So we're gonna have 3 of those, but then when we actually build the house that we're building, like our dream house, we're gonna be building out of hempcrete.
Wait, hempcrete. It's like concrete,
correct.
But hemp is the first part of the word.
Yes.
Wow, okay, so made out of the plant, right? The beautiful, amazing plant.
Yep, exactly. And a lot of people don't realize, the stock, the hemp herds is what you use to make hempcrete, and some people don't realize, a lot of times it's just a waste product, but you can do so much with that. And when you mix the hemp with the lime and with water, like you can actually create hempcrete, which is mold resistant, fire resistant, it's antimicrobial. Like there's so many benefits to building with hempcrete. And it's what's that word called? It holds an R value. It's insulating. It's insulating, and you put up a plaster on the outside of it, and you can totally build a house. You can grow your own.
Is it like a mud when Ryan gets to working it? Is it like mud in a wheelbarrow that you just lap it down and
kind of, yeah. It's
wooden supports or a wooden frame where it goes down inside?
Yep, you build the wooden frame around, and then but it's kind of grainy because it's got long strings, like the hemp herd, the way that it's processed, it kind of feels, but yeah, that's kind of the idea, is you have a mixer and you mix it all up, and then you play with it. It takes a little while for it to dry. It depends on how many inches you have for how long it's going to take for it to dry, but they just put up a hempcrete, what they called it a hemple, small little temple made of hemp, and it was a 3-week project. There was 15 of them, and they put up an entire hemple in 3 weeks in a project that they were doing down in Texas. And so we're going to do something like that on our property, but it's going to be a much bigger project than this small little temple that they just built.
We're talking with Louise Milliman from North Georgia. She's a homesteader, and she's gotten some strong ideas you say you didn't know who John Holt was, but John Holt wrote in the 1970s about unschooling. You describe yourself as an unschooler. So she's a mom of two girls, evidently home educated girls, and not wanting to be part of the central factory system for generating citizens, or if you will, or maybe consumers. And she's part of a larger interest. It's a long-standing interest. And there's something about survival in it, and I think what you're doing, Louise, accounts for the relocalization of American life, and that's a long-term process. One of my favorite writers is James Howard Kunstler. He thinks that this is something that's coming very soon, and he's described by some as a neo-medievalist. In other words, the things are going to be breaking down so badly, social order is going to be so decayed, and there's going to be mass poverty, mass harm, greatly lean years, greatly scarce times ahead. And the reason you're on my show is because I want you to think about looking in this direction, because you're ahead of all of us, Louise, in what you're proposing, and to have this sort of subsistence economy where you have independence of means. And as the world gains what I like to describe as proximification, in other words, things become more proximate, they become nearer to you as the world gets bigger and bigger, as things become more remote, travel becomes more expensive, more prohibitive. We have continuing crises. We'll probably have another 20 years of viral crises, viral disasters, and lockdowns. These are promised by the good people. This is how they're going to control us. And you are providing in your experiment means of thinking in the direction of independence. Well, let me just ask you about that. What about using cars to get here and there? How about cars? Once you can't get a car registered unless you are a resident, and that might be a problem to be freely traveling. You're going to be facing police at that point. David Tulis here. We have with us Louise Milliman, who is a homesteader in a location in Georgia, which we cannot reveal. We won't reveal that, and we won't even say which county. But she's a woman who knows what a PMA is. A PMA is a private membership association, and that is in that type of context, it's like a private trust. You can do things in private that are not subject to taxation or regulation. So having a private membership association for your educational needs, your medical needs are all prospects. You might have one for a herd share for a goat or cows, where you have a private relationship, again, not subject to taxation because it's not involving commerce, does not affect the public interest, is not involved in intrastate or interstate commerce subject to regulation and taxation. So that's what she's all about with her farm country and there are hills involved there, and land and cows and rows of vegetables, and still living in a camper, looking to build a house out of hempcrete, which is another amazing fruit of the hemp plant. Which of course is good for, you can make paper out of hemp, you can make clothing out of hemp, and now a house. So these are important prospects to think about, and ideas to put in mind. And we are wanting to find out about how this family will deal with the whole travel issue. Because Louise, if you have a car and you want to have a tag on it to avoid getting the attention of the police, you have to have a current tag. And you can't get a tag unless you go to the county clerk and enter your car into the stream of commerce as a motor vehicle. But you have to be a resident. You'll have to prove residency. Now, I'd rather not be a resident of the county in which you live, but I'd rather be an inhabitant. But to get the car registered, you have to reduce your status to that of resident. And now suddenly you're on the grid. And how do you what are your thoughts about maybe dealing with that? I know it's a thorny question and you haven't thought about it, but that's kind of scary thought, these dealings with cops.
Yeah. That really hasn't came up yet for us, only because we still have been connected in that way, like with our previous address, like all of our stuff has been registered there, right? So it's something that, like, it is a bridge that we'll have to cross when we get there. I know that it could come up at some point because we don't have an address, and we don't plan to have an address. And so that is something that could come up. I know some other people who do some stuff like this. When we used to travel full time, I know people that would register or have their mail being sent to like a family member's house or something like that. So that could be a potential option. But again, I think that's a bridge that we're going to have to cross once we get there, and it probably will come up sooner than later, but it just hasn't came up for us yet. So I love that you brought that up, because it makes me think about what would we do.
Well, I'm all for liberty and people having the absolute right of ingress and egress, and that is how you do have a right to travel by right, but the courts reject the right to travel. In Tennessee, the courts say, well, there is no right to travel except changing of domicile from one state to the other, and all other movement by car, truck, or motorbike is transportation, which means all movement is commercial, and we're going to force you into the commercial grid and into the commercial network so that we can surveil, harass, tax, and chase after you and penalize you and keep our sort of pseudo-judicial system busy. And I have a friend, one of the gnomes, who has a company in, I think, either North or South Dakota, where much capital is being brought in with minimal regulation, and so he has a company there with a registered agent, and he has a car registered in that state. So he doesn't have to. He can't get a driver's license or register a car here on account of his being off the grid. So this is another person like you and your husband. Yep. We're talking with Louise Milliman, and so let me ask you about this whole enterprise that you're undertaking. It seems like there's a lot of money spent. Did you have to spend all your savings? Have you depleted your savings on buying, let's say, the land and materials, and you're putting up silos? You're going to try to live in a silo temporarily while building a house from hempcrete. So are you rich people? Do you have big savings? Are you venture capitalists with a giant checkbook, Louise Milliman?
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff does cost money, right? So you are still in the system in some sort of way, in some sort of sense. And I mean, right. I do have multiple businesses that I'm a business owner. We used to live in California, and when I lived there, I started my first business, which is thermography, infrared thermography for wellness, which since I moved from California, we still have offices in California. We actually operate our main offices in Granite Bay, California. And we service the greater Sacramento area, but then we also brought our thermography business here. And so actually, I love that you've been talking about Dr. Lisa from Family Chiropractic, because she is one of the chiropractors in this local area that we partner with. So if anyone who's looking for holistic health screening through thermal imaging, we offer thermography scans out of her office about once or sometimes twice a month.
Well, explain what this is about.
Thermography is a heat detection test, and so we are very, radiation free. There's no harm, like a lot of times, and be careful with my words here because I have to be very compliant when I talk, and that's another part of being in the system, right? There's certain things I can say and then I can't, right? But people come to us when they're looking for, when they want to test their bodies holistically without any harm that's being done to their bodies. And so sometimes women, especially after they reach the age of 40, they're told you should go get a mammogram. Well, lots of times what we're doing is an adjunctive test to mammography, where we're actually looking for a heat detection. We're a physiological test. We are not an anatomical test, but we are able to pick up things very, very early on based on the heat that's coming from your body. And the whole idea is that if you have disease, or if you have something going on in your body is symmetrical with a slight degree of variation, but what's on the left should be on the right, and and so on. And so we know that if there's something going on the right side, and it's a certain degrees hotter or even colder, because we're not only looking for heat, we're also looking for lack of heat. We know that there could be an area of concern there, and so we're able to test the body. We do breast scans, we do full body scans, we do upper body scans. We're able to detect for thyroid disease, breast cancer, cerebrovascular disease, for pre-stroke conditions, neuromuscular disorders, stuff like that we are doing with thermal imaging.
Is it fair to say that you give a diagnosis, or is that word somehow owned by the state and you can't use it?
Yeah, we do not do any diagnosing whatsoever. And for myself, I'm just a technician. So really, I just shoot the images and I send the images to a team of doctors that I work with. And then they interpret the results. And it's just like when people go get ultrasounds, like the technician is just the one doing the ultrasound, and then the doctor.
So the doctor who does the review of the document, he could give a diagnosis. But you don't.
No, thermography in itself is non-diagnostic. So, okay. I mean, it's really just giving people information.
It's suggestive
of
things.
Yeah, it suggests what could be going on, and then you would look further into what you may need to do from there. And so if you get the results and you work with a local doctor, a naturopath, chiropractor, and the only reason I say those terms is because those are the people that are really into thermography for the most part. Most medical doctors, because they don't learn about this in medical school, they don't necessarily know it, and sometimes if they don't know it, they don't utilize it. But your doctor could take the results that we provide, and if they wanted to help diagnose with something like that, then of course that can happen. But as far as just the thermography alone, we do not diagnose. We just help uncover what could potentially be going on, and then you do further testing yourself.
Do you have another business?
I do. And so along with that, it's like I'm all about promoting a natural and proactive health. And so one of the things I also do is I help people feel better by drinking really amazing water, which is Kangen water. It's electrolyzed reduced water. It's structured water.
Wait, electrolyzed reduced?
Yes.
Okay, what does that mean?
So basically it's disassociated. What happens is it's a machine that you place on your kitchen counter, and it takes your tap water, it throws it through a machine that has plates inside of it, and these are medical grade titanium plates that are dipped in platinum, and they hold an electrical charge, and as the water runs over those plates, it actually disassociates or structures the water in such a way that your body can absorb it, and the process of osmosis can occur much more efficiently. And on top of that, you're actually getting molecular hydrogen into your water, and your water becomes alkalized with a lot of really beneficial alkaline minerals such as calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium. And I know you've had Taylor on here before talking about Kangen water. Her and I actually work with Kangen water together. We help to educate the public about the benefits of like drinking electrolyzed reduced water, or another way, some people call it living water, some people call it structured water, some people call it
is it fair to call it low acid, how is it?
Alkaline water?
Yeah, alkaline means low acidity.
Yes.
Alkaline is the opposite of acidic, right?
Correct.
So it's low alkaline. No, it's high alkaline water.
Right. Yeah.
Non-acidic water.
Correct, but it's not done in the same way that you would when you purchase alkaline water from a grocery store. You're talking about you're going to a place where the water that you're getting has been cleaned and stripped. It's been put through usually a reverse osmosis process, which is taking all the bad stuff out, which we want, but also all the good stuff, and then they're adding things back in to raise the pH. So lots of times they're adding baking soda. I mean, if you look on the bottle, there's an ingredient list on alkaline water bottles. It says sodium bicarbonate, that's baking soda, or it says potassium or whatever. It's adding stuff back in, and when you add synthetic minerals back into water, it's going to be completely different for your body to utilize that versus just having the naturally occurring minerals that are already in the water.
Well, I think any water that goes through reverse osmosis probably is dangerous, because doesn't that leach out things in your body? If you have water that has everything taken out of it, drinking that water takes from your body,
right,
and then it goes out in your waste. So is that not dangerous to have reverse osmosis?
Yes.
Generally speaking?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that over a long period of time, there's some really detrimental effects that could come from drinking demineralized water, because water is a giver or a taker. If it doesn't have minerals in it while it runs through your body, it will take from you. And it's especially important for women who are either nursing, or if they're pregnant, or if they've recently given birth, because we're even at more of a risk because we already have baby taking a lot from us. So we want to make sure that we have those minerals in our water for sure.
We're talking with Louise Milliman, and the number to call if you have a question or a comment is 598-4969. That's the Knife Shop Studio hotline. And do feel free to call. We'll let you on the air. I'd love to have you on the air to hear what you have to say. What concerns do you have? What does Louise need to consider? We'd like to hear from you. Again, it's a 423 area code, and it's 598-4969. And I'm David Tulis, and Louise Milliman is married, mother of two, and lives as a homesteader. And we're hearing how she and her family, with girls helping with their shovels and hoes and their observations and their fruit baskets on their hips, helping out, making their way to make their land livable. How many acres are there altogether, Louise?
We have 26.
26 acres. And how much is field and how much is forest?
We have about 10 acres that's cleared for pasture, where there's about 10 acres on the other side that's mix of pasture and trees and a little bit of both. And then we have about 6 acres of that's fully wooded.
Again, the number to call is 598-4969, 598-4969. So you have two businesses. It sounds like you believe, rather than being an employee somewhere and having a regular paycheck, you want to be the owner, and you want to try these two areas. So Kangen water, which is low alkaline, special, healthy water, and thermography? Is that the right?
Yep.
Using infrared heat detection, thermogram or thermography services. And so are these your two means of earning Federal Reserve notes?
Yes.
Okay. Or as I say, money. And we do believe here that you should use cash. The cash economy is the one that's where freedom is. And if you want the Great Reset, and you want the good people to control and have total insight into your life, maybe you need that. So maybe you should continue doing what you've been doing. But if you want continuing supervision and continuing reliance on centralized digital and other systems, banking related, then use the credit card and write checks. But cash is important. Let me ask you about the cash economy. How important is that? I emphasize that, but maybe I'm missing something, Louise. What about cash versus, let's say, credit cards in your life?
Like, how much do I use?
Well, yeah, I mean, credit cards, you have a business in California still, so some things have to be done digitally on the credit scheme. But
right.
Is cash really better? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think cash is better. And in a perfect world, we wouldn't really have to, because anything that you use on a card is traceable, and it's another way that we don't need the government knowing what. I mean, it's ridiculous. When we wanted to buy our land, and anytime we've ever tried to buy a house or anything, but they want to know exactly where your money's coming from. I remember when we wanted to buy our land, we had like $10,000 of cash that we wanted to put in the bank, and they're like, you cannot do that. You have to make sure we know exactly where it's coming from and why it's coming from. You can't just be like, yo, I pulled it out of my mattress. That doesn't work. They want like a paper trail for everything, which is absolutely ridiculous. And so, I mean, I don't agree with it, but at some point, to participate in society, you do have to go along with you play their game in some ways so that you can, not make your life as complicated as you need it to be, but without, you fall in, find that balance.
Right, we recognize our slave status as we try to be free.
Right, exactly.
With the other hand.
Yep.
Well, this is David Tulis and Louise Milliman. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
We'd like to hear more from her and this kind of life. I hope you have some ideas to think about. Okay, think about where you are. Make some small steps where you are. Right, we're wanting to move along. We're wanting to have independence and liberty. And my name is David Tulis. Next, the news and sponsor messages.